Hello everyone, Andrew from editing here. I forgot to mention a couple things in my introduction, and I want to add a couple things after I film this video. So I am currently away from YouTube. I am releasing very lately. For the next 1 to 2 months. I will be back after that point. If you saw my latest Coffee Thoughts episode 6, you will know why. And if not, go check that out. That explains everything. And I don't really have the time to do it here. Now, this video is a fairly long video. I cover a fairly wide range of topic, although it's all connected to the mainstream media basically being a joke at this point. So I'm going to create some timestamps for it, just so that you can skip around if there's something you don't want to hear. But I hope you're having a good day, and I will see you when I get back. Bye-bye. Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Andrew. The mainstream media is a joke. Why are we talking about this? I know if you're from the US or from the UK, they actually call it the legacy media in the UK. I was actually just talking to a couple people from the UK about this, trying to get their perspective from it too, just out of curiosity. And yes, a lot of people in the UK apparently realize that the legacy media, as they call it, the mainstream media as we call it, is a joke too. So if you're from the US or the UK, you're looking at this and you're saying, of course it is. Why are we even talking about this? It's obvious. For some reason, Canadians are lagging behind in realizing just how much of a joke the media is. Now, I think there are reasons for that, and I'm going to talk about that later on in this video. But first, I want to talk about a couple incidences that have happened. One specifically in the last little while that just adds to this list, because there is an ever-growing list at this point of ridiculous things that the mainstream media has done to themselves to reveal just how bad they are. And it's crazy to me that some of these things are on this list. One of my favorites, I've mentioned it before, CNN brought to you by Pfizer, and then in that sponsored day of news, they run a piece on Pfizer, which is meant to be a news piece, but it's basically just a ad for Pfizer pretending to be a news piece, because they're going to say anything bad against Pfizer if they're sponsored by it. Yeah, sure. So yeah, just things like that make the mainstream media ridiculous. But this latest thing to happen, and I'm a little late to this party. I get it. I've been filming other stuff, doing other things, but I do want to talk about this, so I'm talking about it now. Is the BBC interview with Andrew Tate. Now, before we get into the specific interview, I do want to say something. I know Andrew Tate is a very polarizing figure. I know that people either think he's God's gift to earth or he's the literal devil, and there's no in between, or there's very little in between. I have personally not seen a lot of content from Andrew Tate. I've seen a couple of videos where they were just like clips cut up from different podcasts and interviews that he's been on, compiled together, but those are out of context, and I always hesitate to judge someone out of context, because I mean, you can make anyone look bad out of context. You can have anyone say anything and make it look bad out of context. You really can. So I don't like judging someone based on that. And I haven't seen enough of his stuff really to have much of an opinion on him. Now, I will say, from what I have seen, there are things that I agree with what he's saying, and there are things that I disagree with, which I think is a pretty normal thing. Are you just his clone in that you agree completely, or are you just, oh no, there's absolutely nothing I agree with him? Well, maybe fair enough. Okay, I'm sure there are those people out there, but I find it a little weird that, well, I mean, it's 2023, so anything is possible now. But to me personally, I kind of find it weird that these people are asked, "Oh, what's your opinion on Andrew Tate?" "Oh, I hate him. He's a horrible person. He's evil." "Oh, okay. So what have you seen about Andrew Tate online or anywhere else?" "Oh, nothing. I just know he's a horrible person." Because you were told and you're a puppet or a sheep? It blows my mind. But that's 2023 for you. Actually, it's been more than 2023. This has been happening for years, but this year is 2023, so I'll say it's 2023 for you. I also want to address the whole him being jailed without being charged thing. I don't care what type of human being you are, that is wrong. There's a reason you could not get away with that in North America, except in rare circumstances, which, in my opinion, were all wrong and were disgusting. And no one deserves that. And there's a group of people, although I don't think, well, there are I did see a couple of different interviews where people were like, "Yeah, he deserves it. He deserves to be in jail without being charged. He's not been found guilty. He's not been found innocent. He's just in jail because he might be guilty." If that was you and they did that to you, would you be okay with that? And so if you're not okay with it for you, why are you okay with it for him? That's very hypocritical, isn't it? So if you're saying, yes, I'm okay with that, you're a hypocrite and just shut up. And if you're saying no, you're lying to yourself and to everyone else, and just shut up. Because it's like that. I don't even understand how people could say something like that in today's world. It's a ridiculous idea that someone, based on whether you think they're good or bad, deserves to be in jail for any amount of time without ever being charged. That's ridiculous. And thankfully, the Romanian courts stepped in and he was released after way too long being in jail, by the way. But he has now been charged. And he has been charged now because they were up. Like, it was up. That was it. This is how much time you have to charge him. And they had to charge him. Now, I've heard things on both sides as to, the stories behind him being guilty or innocent or whatever. But I would like to point out to everyone as well, he's only been charged. He hasn't had a court hearing yet. It hasn't been decided whether he's guilty or innocent. And quite honestly, I believe, although a lot of people these days apparently don't, innocent until proven guilty. And so until he is charged with something, it is what it is. Now, some of his charges are quite bad, but again, they have to prove them to be true. And I am no lawyer. I have no legal expertise. My gut instinct, from what I've heard and from what's being said on multiple accounts, if his story is true about the one woman in particular that seems to have led to a lot of these charges, then I think he will be found innocent of most. However, I think they could still probably get him on a couple of them, on a couple charges. So we'll have to wait and see. It is what it is. But yeah, well, he's a bad person, so he should be in jail. That's so ridiculous. I actually had a friend who was charged with something and found innocent. He was found innocent because he wasn't even there he wasn't even in the province on the day in question. But it kind of apparently the suspect kind of looked like him, and someone said it was him, and so he got charged with it. It was very, I don't even know why it went to trial, because he provided evidence that he wasn't even in the province at that point. But it happens, and so don't just assume someone's guilty because they're charged with something. That's a ridiculous idea. There are lots of people who get charged with stuff and are found guilty, and there are lots of people who get charged with stuff and are found completely innocent. So, we're going to have to wait and see with him. But the BBC, after he got out, went and interviewed him. Now, you may be hearing banging in the background. One of the apartments is being renovated in the area of my apartment building, and so you may hear some banging, so bear with that. But the BBC went and interviewed him, and my God, he did something ingenious. So the BBC interviewed him, came back, and ran their very edited video, and not shortly thereafter, and I actually watched that video, and I saw that video first, and so I'm like, okay, well that was a weird interview. There was a weird energy to it and stuff like that. You could tell it was edited, but then Andrew Tate released the full version because he was also recording it. And good for him. Good for him. And I think everyone should do this. Because, well, if the mainstream media, or in this case the legacy media, being that it was from the BBC, wants to pull the type of shit they tried to pull with Andrew Tate, yeah, I would film everything too. If they're gonna film, you can film. And yeah, release the unedited version of it. It was hard to watch, quite honestly. If the interviewer came in with a very definitive goal of trying to get Andrew Tate to admit to charges, to get Andrew Tate to, like, basically they were trying to make it easier for Romania to say, yeah, see, look, he even said he was guilty. Now, obviously, it was not. The Romanian charges are the whole process is ongoing, so he can't comment about a lot of that, and so he had to skirt certain issues, and not talk about things that I'm sure he would like to talk about, but he just can't because of his ongoing legal issues. But if she didn't get the answer she wanted, she would just pose the question again with a slightly different spin on it, and it was disgusting, and it was an attempt to try and make him look like a horrible monster. It was an attempt to, have him self-incriminate, and that's what she tried to do. And kudos to Andrew Tate. I don't know much about this guy, but this guy is honestly, he can stay calm in a hostile environment. I'll give him that, because he stayed very calm in that interview, and he kept his head, which a lot of people wouldn't or couldn't when they were being bombarded the way they were. But it was just ridiculous. And by the way, put that into contrast where there was another individual that has been found guilty of what's it called? Oh, the thought it escapes me now. But there was another individual, the BBC, grooming. Right. Okay. So there was another individual the BBC interviewed, who was actually found to have been grooming kids. And their first question to Andrew Tate was something along the lines of, you've said these horrible things online, and and so why aren't you a monster? Is essentially like, so you must be a monster, and just to put that in juxtaposition to this other interview where this guy who has been found guilty of grooming kids, their first question to him is, "Oh, how are you dealing with this? It must be hard." You can tell who the BBC likes and who the BBC doesn't like. I mean, but we've known that this is a thing for a while now. I mean, I've seen it with the interviews done by Jordan Peterson, for instance, who is a guy that I follow, and it's ridiculous how. So you're saying that you don't? Oh, I really like cats. So you're saying you don't like dogs? If you follow Jordan Peterson, you know exactly who I'm talking about. And that was BBC again. Yeah. So it was a joke, and kudos to him, honestly, for putting that up. And what's very interesting is, all of a sudden on that BBC interview that they released, comments got turned off for some reason, and then very shortly after that, the interview got taken off. Now I don't know if it's back up. I don't know if anyone else has it up. If it is, watch the two. Watch the BBC one first, and then watch the full length one, and see how much editing makes a damn bit of difference. Because number one, they made the interviewer look competent, and in my opinion, she was not. I mean, she could ask the questions, but if he gives you an answer, just because you don't like the answer doesn't mean you get to ask the question again and again and again and again and again. It's 2023. It's 2023. But the interesting thing here is, so Americans have realized for a while, and apparently from the people I talk to, at least in the UK, they have realized for a while that the mainstream / legacy media is a joke. Here in Canada, we're lagging behind. I think there's a couple reasons for that, like I said earlier. First of all, compared to the American examples that we have, because we get a lot of American TV, American channels on our TV, much to the chagrin of the American channels. There's the whole thing there. But compared to your news in America, our news seems quite unbiased. Our news hides it. Our news is not unbiased, by the way, but our news hides it better than yours does. And so I think when Canadians look at the two examples, and even look at the BBC too, because we usually get a BBC channel as well, we can, well, look at that, theirs is crazy, ours is great compared to that. Maybe ours is slightly better compared to that, but ours is not great either. And I'm just going to highlight a couple reasons why. And so I think, well, for me, a couple different things happened, especially during the pandemic, and I'm hesitant to even say this because I don't know whether YouTube is still going to have an issue with it or not. But a certain item we were all told we need to wear. I'm sure you can figure out what I'm talking about. That certain item. Well, we were told by let's put it this way. Here in Canada, the mainstream media followed what the Prime Minister was saying, and that's actually something I think, looking back at the mainstream media, because I've kind of tried to remember like things that have happened throughout me watching Canadian news, and although my memory is not the greatest, anyone who knows me can tell you that. For what I think is slightly different is that whereas the the American news is more biased left or right. Our news just follows and basically is a spokesperson for whoever's in charge at the time, which is no better in my opinion. You should be independent of the government, and you should be always critical of what the government does. If you find no issue with what the government does, fine, but you should still be critical. So, and I don't think our news is that independent from the government, and I have a couple examples of why, or of that being the case. One of them, again, they literally followed exactly what our Prime Minister Trudeau said about a certain article that you had to wear during the pandemic, and if they had have looked into research, if they had have done anything like that, they could have told you. When he was saying, "Oh no," if they had looked at research, they could have said, "Oh yes." And then no one asked the interesting question of why he did a complete 180. That's an interesting question. Well, no, that's not true. Someone did ask him that question actually at one of the press conferences that he was holding. It wasn't a mainstream media; it was a online media source. And after that point, they weren't allowed back for any more press conferences. They also asked the horrible question of, well, our person in charge of health, I forget her title at the time, also worked for the World Health Organization, and his horrible other question that got him kicked out and never allowed to return because he wasn't the news, according to our wonderful Prime Minister, was something along the lines of, okay, well, if Canada comes out and says we have to do this policy, but the World Health Organization comes out and says we have to do this policy, and they are different from each other, where do her allegiances more significantly lie? Do they lie with Canada, or do they lie with the World Health Organization? Oh, what a gotcha question. Same with the mask. Same with the other one. I'm going to have to blip that. Same with the other one. Earlier you said no, it's not going to do anything. Now you said yes, it's going to do something. Why the change? And they weren't overly happy about those two questions, and so this guy, it was decided that he was not news. Now, if your Prime Minister can decide who is news and who is not news, and if you don't go with the Prime Minister on his spin on things and such dictated as not news, that's a lot of news organizations fell in line. And truth be told, they've been in line for a while. As he tried to go to the next press conference, and he was kicked out, being told that he's not news. None of the other people there batted an eyelid. None of the other reporters, none of the other media organizations batted an eyelid that he was being kicked out. Again, well, as long as it's not me. Hypocrisy. But so it is just as bad in Canada, and I can give you a bunch of other examples. The Freedom Convoy was absolutely vilified in the news. They followed Trudeau's talking points word for word, and in fact they made up a lot of bullshit about that convoy, and people were just like, well, people in Canada generally have a fairly high trust level for their news, and so they just assumed that what they were being told was true. But here's a good question. So one of the things that they claimed, or the mainstream media claimed, was that the Freedom Convoy, or people within the Freedom Convoy, had defaced a bunch of monuments. Now, one monument got defaced. That is true. There's no evidence that it was someone from the Freedom Convoy that did it. but let's say the benefit of the doubt. Someone from the Freedom Convoy defaced it. Okay, that's horrible. That's on that one individual, not on the entire movement, number one. Number two, after that, the Freedom Convoy hired a security guard to look after that monument to make sure no one else did anything to it. That wasn't covered in the media either. Now, they claimed that they had defaced a whole bunch of other of these monuments that we have in Ottawa, and yet the only one they showed defaced was the one that we know got defaced. And actually, there were people there that that took pictures of the other monuments, and there was nothing wrong with them whatsoever, and they had not been defaced. So that was a straight up lie and a talking point. The fact that a Union flag and a swastika flag showed up in that movement. Those people incidentally were asked to leave because the Freedom Convoy wanted nothing to do with them either. And yet that was part of their Freedom Convoy all of a sudden, magically. And we don't even know if these people were connected to the Freedom Convoy. We don't know if these were people that were sent by the government to discredit the convoy. I mean, that happens. That's a thing. There's been significant evidence of that for many things. Just look at what happened with the U.S. storming the Capitol. And there's a very funny clip of the person in charge of the FBI being asked, were there FBI agents there? And she can't answer a single damn question about it, apparently. Oh, we know the truth. So, it's just as bad here in Canada. It's just bad in a different way. And I think because the US is so extremely ridiculous, it makes the Canadian one look, quite honestly, a lot better than what it actually is. And so I think a lot of Canadians are kind of holding on to that idea of, well, this is still pretty good. Look at the American example or look at the British example. But it's still not good. It's not, people. And unfortunately, I think also a lot of people just have their head in the sand. They want to believe something, and it's too convenient not to believe that, and so they stick their head in the sand and pretend like everything's okay. Unfortunately, being a bit of a realist, I cannot do that. I see the issues, and I would rather talk about them, because I would rather, let's try to find ways to make this better. Let's try to either find ways to fix it. Now, truth be told, I think the mainstream media is too gone to fix it, and I think we just need to stop watching the BS and go elsewhere. There are great, smaller, independent groups out there that are covering everything. Some of them have a spin of politics, of whatever side they are. At least they're honest about it. CNN pretends that they're unbiased, and then for all during the Trump election, every CNN piece was a hit piece about Trump. But they're unbiased. Did they do that for Biden? No? Oh, interesting. And just, I will mention this about the States before I go. I have heard people talking. I don't have many people I actually know anymore from the States, but I've heard people online and seen people talking about this, and for some reason they think that the mainstream media is bad except for the one they watch. So I'll give you a good example. Say like a Republican. Oh, well, CNN is horrible, but Fox News is great. Really? No. And vice versa. Oh, Fox News is horrible, but MSNBC, that's a great... No, they're not. No, they're not. They're just as bad as each other. I get that because people are biased and lean in a certain direction, that it's very hard to present something unbiased because you're going to always add a slant to what you're talking about. And if you're writing something, you're going to add that slant. So I get that it's very hard to be unbiased, but there are just these. It's just ridiculous when it comes to the mainstream news. So I support a couple of smaller news organizations from Canada and the US, actually, and that's where I get my news personally a lot of the time. I will occasionally tune into the mainstream just to see bigger news stories, because generally they can get that information quicker than the smaller ones can. Yeah, for the most part, I don't even watch it. And quite honestly, this is my suggestion to everyone watching this. And if you take nothing else from this video, think about this and make your own damn mind up. I'm not trying to tell you what to do, but just think about it. If no one watched the mainstream media, or very few people watched the mainstream media, do you think they would be forced to change? Then why are you still tuned in? Just saying. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.